He heard the heartbeat again, not in a hospital, but in their own home. And in that quiet moment, Quang realized his life would never be the same. Hello everyone, hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, we're going to explore a tender and emotional chapter in Linda and Quang's journey, when love, responsibility, and a tiny heartbeat begin to shape a new future. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next episodes. The car rolls to a stop in front of the house just as the afternoon light begins to soften. Not bright anymore, not heavy either, just calm. Quang turns off the engine and stays still for a second, his hands resting on the steering wheel longer than usual. He exhales slowly, like he's leaving something behind outside the car. Linda unfastens her seatbelt but doesn't move right away. The morning has taken more out of her than she expected. Her body feels lighter now that the appointment is over, yet strangely fragile at the same time. Quang notices. "Go slow," he says quietly, already stepping out to open her door. Linda gives a small smile. "I'm okay." But she lets him walk close as they head inside, not holding her arm, not guiding her. Just there, close enough that she feels steady. Inside the house, the silence wraps around them gently. No phones ringing, no assistants, no hospital machines. Just the familiar space they've shared, now feeling different. Quang places his jacket on the chair, then immediately turns back to Linda. "Sit," he says, softer than before. "I'll get you some water." Linda watches him move through the kitchen with a kind of quiet curiosity. The way he remembers where everything is, the way he rinses the glass twice without thinking, the way he keeps glancing back at her, as if making sure she's still there. She lowers herself onto the couch, one hand instinctively resting on her stomach. For the first time since they left the hospital, the image of the screen comes back to her. The sound. That steady, undeniable rhythm. A heartbeat. Quang returns and places the glass in her hand carefully, as if it's something fragile too. "Drink a little," he says, "not all at once." She nods and takes a few small sips. They sit there for a moment, neither of them speaking. The quiet isn't awkward, it's full. Quang finally breaks it, his voice thoughtful. "Are you tired?" "A bit," Linda admits, "but not in a bad way." He studies her face, the color in her cheeks, the way her breathing has slowed, the tension that's finally eased from her shoulders. "Maybe you should lie down for a while," he suggests. Linda hesitates. "You don't have to stay. I know you probably—" "I'm not going anywhere," Quang interrupts, gently but firmly. The words land heavier than he expects. Linda looks at him. There's no hesitation in his expression, no calculation, just certainty. She nods. In the bedroom, sunlight filters through the curtains, casting soft patterns across the bed. Linda sits down slowly, then lies back, adjusting the pillow beneath her head. Quang stands near the doorway, unsure what to do with his hands, his body, his thoughts. "Come sit," Linda says quietly, noticing his pause. He moves to the edge of the bed and sits, careful not to disturb her. For a while, he just watches her breathe. Linda closes her eyes, but she knows he's looking. She can feel it, not heavy, not intrusive, just present. "You're really quiet," she says softly. Quang smiles faintly. "I'm thinking." "About?" He hesitates, then answers honestly. "Everything." She opens her eyes again and turns her head slightly to look at him. "Is that a good thing?" He chuckles under his breath. "I don't know yet." Another silence settles in. Then, almost without realizing it, Quang's gaze drops to her stomach. He swallows. At the hospital, there were screens and doctors and explanations. The moment had been powerful, but also distant, mediated by machines and words. This is different. This is real in a way that feels closer. Can I? He asks, stopping himself. Linda knows what he means. She doesn't answer right away. Instead, she shifts slightly, giving him space. Yes, she says. Slowly, almost reverently, Quang leans down. He hesitates for just a second longer, then gently places his ear against her stomach. He listens. At first, he hears nothing, just the faint sound of fabric, her breathing. Then, there it is. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady. A rhythm. His eyes widen. He lifts his head, stunned. I heard it. Linda smiles. A real one this time. You did? Quang nods, disbelief written all over his face. I really did. As if needing to be sure, he lowers his head again. This time, he doesn't rush. He stays still, listening, letting the moment stretch. The corners of his lips lift slowly. A smile breaks through, unguarded, almost boyish. That's incredible, he murmurs, more to himself than to her. He lifts his head and looks at Linda, eyes shining. There's really someone there. Linda's chest tightens, but not with fear this time. With us, she corrects gently. Quang's smile softens. Yes, he says, with us. Without thinking, he places his hand over her stomach, not pressing, not claiming, just resting there. The warmth of his palm settles in. Linda covers his hand with hers. Neither of them speaks. They don't need to. For the first time, the future doesn't feel like a question mark. It feels like a heartbeat, quiet, steady, and impossibly real. Quang stays like that for a long time, listening, smiling, grounding himself in the moment. And somewhere deep inside, something shifts. Quang doesn't move his hand away right away. He keeps it there, resting gently on Linda's stomach, as if he's afraid that if he lifts it too soon, the moment might disappear. Linda watches him from the corner of her eye. The way his expression has changed, softer, slower, almost careful. This isn't the Quang who commands meetings or makes billion-dollar decisions without blinking. This is a man listening. After a while, Quang finally sits back, exhaling quietly. He runs a hand through his hair, still smiling to himself. I didn't think it would feel like that, he admits. Linda turns her head toward him. Like what? Like it suddenly became real, he says, searching for the right words. At the hospital, I understood it with my head. Here, he taps his chest lightly. I feel it. Linda's fingers tighten slightly around the blanket. That's what scares me, she says honestly. Quang looks at her, surprised. Scares you? She nods. Because when it feels real, it means there's more to lose. The room grows quiet again. Quang doesn't rush to answer. He leans back against the headboard, eyes drifting toward the window, thinking. You know, he says slowly, I've always believed that worrying means you're already behind, that if you hesitate, someone else will move faster. Linda listens, but today, he pauses. Today, I realized something. She waits. I don't want to be fast anymore. Her breath catches, just a little. Quang turns back to her. I want to be careful. I want to get this right. Linda studies his face, searching for any hint of uncertainty. She doesn't find it. What she sees instead is something steadier. Resolve that hasn't been announced, but quietly chosen. You don't have to change everything, she says softly. I never asked you to. I know, Quang replies. That's why I want to. The words sit between them, heavy but warm, Linda looks away for a moment, blinking back emotion. She didn't expect this. Not today. Not like this. She had prepared herself for distance, for hesitation, even for doubt. Not for this calm certainty. She shifts slightly, adjusting the pillow beneath her head. The doctor said I need more rest, she says, half teasing, half serious. Quang smiles. Then rest. I'll handle the rest. She raises an eyebrow. Everything? Well, he chuckles. At least the things I can. He stands and reaches for the remote, dimming the light slightly. The room softens, shadows stretching gently across the walls. I'll make some soup later, he adds. Something light. Linda laughs quietly. You? I can follow instructions, he defends himself. Most of the time. She closes her eyes, smiling. Quang watches her carefully as her breathing slows again. When he's sure she's comfortable, he quietly pulls his phone from his pocket. The screen lights up with missed notifications, emails, messages, calls waiting to be returned. He stares at them for a long moment. Then, without opening any of them, he puts the phone face down on the table. He sits back on the edge of the bed, close but not touching, listening to the gentle rhythm of Linda's breath. Minutes pass. Just as he begins to relax into the stillness, the phone vibrates. Once, then again. Quang glances at it, conflicted. Linda stirs slightly, sensing the shift. You should check, she murmurs, eyes still closed. He hesitates. It can wait. She opens her eyes and looks at him. Quang, your work doesn't just disappear because you're here. I know, he says quietly, but neither do you. That stops her. She pushes herself up a little, meeting his gaze. I don't want you to resent this later. His brow furrows. Resent what? Us, she answers. This life. Quang doesn't respond right away. Instead, he reaches out and takes her hand. Fully this time, fingers interlacing. Listen to me, he says, voice low but steady. I've spent years choosing work because it was easy. It didn't need me. It just needed results. Linda listens, heart pounding. This, he continues, gently squeezing her hand, needs me, and I want that. The phone vibrates again, louder this time. Quang exhales, then finally reaches for it. He checks the screen briefly. Project issue? Linda asks. Yes, he admits. They want me back at the office tonight. She nods slowly, processing. Then you should go. He looks at her, conflicted. Are you sure? I'll be okay, she says, though there's a trace of vulnerability beneath her confidence. I don't want you to feel like you're abandoning something every time you leave. Quang studies her face, then looks down at her stomach again. He leans forward and places his hand there one more time, closing his eyes briefly. I'll be back, he says. Soon. Linda covers his hand with hers. I know. Reluctantly, he stands. Before leaving the room, he turns back. If you need anything at all, call me. I don't care where I am. She smiles. Go. Handle your world. As he walks out, the house feels quieter, but not empty. Linda lies back, her hand resting over the place where Quang's had been moments ago. She breathes in deeply, feeling calmer than she has in days. Meanwhile, Quang steps outside, the evening air cool against his skin. He pulls his jacket tighter, glancing back at the house once more before heading to the car. As the engine starts, he places a hand over his chest, grounding himself. There's a rhythm there now. Not just one, two. And for the first time in a long while, Quang knows exactly where he wants to return when the noise of the world fades away.
người bán được giá. Đồng mía cao dần, 45 đồng trở thành hy vọng cho phiên chợ. Một cây mía đổ bất ngờ khiến khiến cả nhóm kêu, rồi cười xòa vì kịp đỡ nhau. Chiều xuống, Linda buồn bã vì con rúi của mình đã biến mất. Nghi có kẻ trộm rình quanh nhà. CEO Quang ghé đến lắng nghe và trấn an và tự sửa chiếc camera cũ trong kho, kéo dây lắp trước sân nhà để bảo vệ cô. Đêm đến, Linda nấu cơm nếp cẩm mời anh ở lại ăn. Hai người trò chuyện lòng ấm lại. Quang kể áp lực công ty, camera nháy sáng, bóng lạ thoáng qua, và không biết Linda có sống sót qua được đêm nay không. Mọi người nếu thấy video hay, hãy cho mình một like, một subscribe. Cảm ơn mọi người nhé.